Why are so many conservative elected officials trying to argue that businesses should stay open during the pandemic? Let's find out. According to The Intercept, big surprise, it's the Kochs. So Kochs fund the Americans for Prosperity, which is their main libertarian political advocacy group. Quote, rather than blanket shutdowns, the government should allow business to continue to adapt and innovate to produce the goods and services Americans need while continuing to do everything they can to protect public health, says Emily Seidel, Chief Executive of Americans for Prosperity. Well, right now these two things are in opposition, and notice which one they put first? Business. But sending people to work makes them less safe, staying at home hurts business. Guess which one can be recreated, people or business? I will choose people every time because people can create business, but as of yet, business cannot create people, not pre-existing people anyways. Also remember that many of these companies aren't even paying their fair share. Do we really need to rush to save companies that hold us back by not paying taxes in the first place? But people want it both ways. Or as Trump has taken to saying, we can do two things at once. Well, not in this case we can't. Quote from Americans for Prosperity. All businesses are essential to the people who own them, the people who work in them, and the communities they serve, says Annie Patnaud, the Michigan State Director for Americans for Prosperity. This is nonsense. No one is arguing that businesses aren't important, but you know what else is essential to these workers? Their lives. If you're creating a situation where people's financial stability is so fragile that they have to risk their very lives and their families' lives in order to earn a paycheck, then something is wrong. Do you think Charles Koch is going to go down and walk among the thousands of workers he's trying to get back to work? Of course not. Of course not. He'll be sitting in his private office, washing his hands in his private sink with his private bathroom that is as sanitary as Everclear. It's really the freedom for you to risk your life to make him more rich. It's about your liberties to die. And guess what other fundamental things Koch and Americans for Prosperity have been up to? In 2018, Americans for Prosperity lobbied the Trump administration to rescind $1 billion from the Center for Disease Control, the CDC. That's right. Part of the reason that our CDC was kneecapped by Trump in 2018 traces back to Koch and the Americans for Prosperity. Let's look at these two things together. Americans for Prosperity wanted to cut the CDC. Then when the global pandemic breaks out, one that could have been dealt with more intelligently if the CDC had not been cut, Americans for Prosperity is saying that workers need to get back to work to protect the economy. So the fight for small government is now costing us real lives. We had people in dozens of countries on the ground ready to alert us about outbreaks in those countries. We cut a bunch of those including China. We are less prepared because of Charles Koch. Americans for Prosperity argued the cuts would relieve the burden overspending is placing on all taxpayers. Well, this statement didn't age very well at all, did it? How much is that budget going to cost us now? A lot. Now, yes, even if we had beefed up the CDC, we'd still be dealing with costs here. But this is going to cost so much more now. And unfortunately, it will also cost a lot of lives. When this is over, people are going to be able to go back and estimate how many lives were lost due to these cuts. We will calculate how many lives trace back to Donald Trump and Charles Koch. Small government sounds great when everything is going well, but the libertarian answer here falls short. The only way to save lives in this case is with government intervention. The CDC is big government, and I'm glad it is, and I'm glad it's there. While the US is shooting to number one in the worst categories it can be number one in. As of today, the US is number one in total cases by over 30,000. We are worse than China, and we had weeks to prepare for this, which we didn't do because we're treating this as a hoax. I get it. People don't want to pay taxes, but how much does that money mean if we lose 1% of the population? The rough estimate for the death rate is a bit under 1%. Assuming things don't get too out of hands at the hospital, 1% of 330 million people is 3.3 million people. Now, we won't all get sick if we stay at home and social distance. We will get sick if we ignore the doctors and scientists and chase some libertarian dogma about liberties in order to make Charles Koch more money while he sits safely in his fancy office. The only reason this isn't worse is because of big government. Big government, the CDC, is the voice of reason in these insane times where we are ready to sacrifice the grandparents while we pray at the altar of pure, unfettered capitalism. Big government is what's ordering many of us to stay home to keep from spreading the virus. Without those government orders, people would be out infecting each other. And where would we be without the thousands of ventilators that the government is supplying? Again, big government. The Army Corps of Engineers is building and releasing plans to cities to convert dorm rooms, stadiums, and hotels into hospitals to have enough beds for the demand we are seeing, and even worse, going to see in the coming weeks and months. That's big government at work. And if you're going to say, well, it would work better if we had a free market solution, then I wholeheartedly disagree. I've heard the argument that the free market will send the right ventilators to the most needed places. Wrong. It sends it to the party with the most money. See the clip.
They urge states to buy directly and not rely on the federal stockpile. Governor Baker spoke to the president again a short time ago. He said he tried to do just that, but lost bids for 3 big orders to the Fed.
I got a feeling that if somebody has a chance to sell to you or has a chance to sell to me, I'm going to lose every one of those.
All right, Charlie. Thank you very much. Well, we do like you going out, seeing what you can get, if you can get it faster. And price is always a component of that also. And maybe that's why you lost to the feds. I'll tell you, that's probably why.
If you, as a normal person, want something, say a ventilator, because you will die without it, and Charles Koch wants the same ventilator as a 3rd or 4th backup for himself, he will outbid you. But he doesn't need it more than you. He's just more rich than you. And we are more poor, comparatively. We all seem at the moment to be outraged as a society, and we seem to agree that right now price gouging at this time is a terrible thing to do. But that's what bidding is right now, right? These companies are bidding off their ventilators. It's a form of price gouging. What makes sense is a coordinated effort to buy the ventilators at a fair price and then distribute them intelligently. And no, selling them to the highest bidder is not considered intelligently, but they will put business before our lives. Our lives have become the cost of doing business, and it works out great for corporations because we are easily replaced. The price of their success is paid for with our lives, by us.
America will again and soon be open for business, very soon, a lot sooner than 3 or 4 months that somebody was suggesting, a lot sooner. We cannot let the cure be worse than the problem itself. We're not going to let the cure be worse than the problem.
And let us not forget about the Great Depression that suffered for 4 years while people waited for the market to work itself out. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Enter FDR, and how did we get out of the Great Depression? Big government and big spending. Now you can argue, well, that's just during the economic collapses that things break down. Well, even if that's true, which it isn't, so what? If your free market hands off the economy style fails when we need it most, then maybe there is a better way. Plus, these economic crashes are happening more often. We now have a generation who have seen 2 crippling economic downturns in a single childhood. Come on, might there be a better way? The greed that powers this kind of thinking is the same greed that drives people to push the economy to the limits so that they can extract every dollar they can before the whole thing collapses, with no regard to how many lives are ruined, only how many dollars are made. So please, go ahead and tell me how a small government is going to fix the environment, minimize a pandemic, or keep a handful of people in this country from becoming oligarchs while everyone else has less and less. For a man who supposedly believes in personal liberties, Charles Koch sure seems to be making the decisions for a lot of us. All right, hit that subscribe button and check out my other videos for more progressive political perspective. And let's remember, Bernie is still in the running.